Welcome to episode 104 of Silver Lining for Learning, meaningful and active learning through technology-expanded classrooms and intense global collaboration. Today we have with us two, maybe three guests coming from Taiwan and from Malta via Mexico, France, and Glasgow. So Jhenyi Wu is coming to us from Tainan in Taiwan, and Diana Zamudio is coming from Malta, but she was originally doing projects in Mexico with people in Europe for cross-cultural collaboration. Sandy Tsai might be with us shortly from Kaohsiung in Taiwan. All three of them were former Fulbrighters in the US, brought over from the State Department on a special project. All three of them were Fulbrighters at Indiana University in particular, and they all took a class I taught on critical and creative thinking, collaboration, motivation, which resulted in all of them doing a book chapter in my most recent book on transformative teaching around the world. All three of them are young female leaders, someone we need to listen to. And all three of them are interested in collaboration, inquiry-based learning, and getting students engaged in the learning process. And so what I'd like to do is to give two questions before we get rolling here, because people watching this episode will wonder, what does it take to become a Fulbright scholar? We've had Fulbright scholars on the show before, but we've never asked them what it takes to get to be a Fulbright scholar, how competitive it is, what kind of hints that they might have for others, how many forms they fill in, and whether they have advice for other people about the Fulbright program. So that's the first question I want to ask. And then I have a follow-up question. So Diana, could you tell the people who might be watching what it entailed to become a Fulbright teacher?
Wow. I would say passion and joy for what we do, and openness to engage with the world, and openness to create networks, and openness to give and share as much as possible from our own country. But yeah, most importantly, I would say the joy of enjoying what we do. I think that's what resonates the most with our learners and colleagues as well.
Jhenyi?
I think it was a bit broken to my, let's say, bottleneck in my life. Not only for the life, family life, also my the teaching job. Because 2016, after that, I got a lot of creative thinking after the IU experience, the Fulbright experience. I met so many brilliant teachers from all over the world, and we have so close, tightly in connections, and then we share a lot of information. So I learned a lot, and I also bring them back to the education system now. So it was a really big change for my life. Yes.
So what I'd like to have you do is to explain the projects that ended up in the book and other things that might be related to this that you've done. So explain the process of your getting students from around the world to collaborate with your students in Mexico and in Taiwan. What was it like? What did you do? What were the challenges and frustrations, as well as the successes that you had? And anything that you've done since then, there are follow-ups. And then after that, Chris and Young and Punya will be asking some questions. And I will too.
Okay, so shall I take first?
Go ahead.
Okay, so actually after that, I also went to like NGO in Taiwan. That it's a non-profit group. It's a wild life for parents and for kids. And so I not only take not only teach in the classroom, which we have, we also have some resources like NGO group or some some governmental policies. So I bring them together. So that's, for example, some exchange students coming to Taiwan, and then we can have some connection to the undergraduates, for the undergraduate students, or for the parents part. And so I use quite a lot of the resources online, and also the platform that they can share their the information. For example, there is a iNaturalist app, so they can bring people together, whether they are outdoor lovers or PhD researchers. They can bring people closer for the nature. Yes, this is one I really enjoy in the teaching part. So students can use their phone to engage the public researchers. So they find the interesting, like, insects or plants or animals, and they take a photo and they upload it. And then, because the phone GPS can localize their place, so the animals from the world will be upload their images. And there are experts. They will clearly make sure the name of the animals, so people can engage in the world.
I want to back up a bit. Go back to your chapter, because I think you're talking about after you did that chapter. So can you explain what you did in the chapter? It was an environmental project,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you want to describe that and the collaborations, maybe I think it was with Japan or with other countries too.
Yes, I have brought some Russia and also some Japan, America undergraduates, because they have gap year to come to Taiwan, and then we bring them to the university class in the environmental and ecology class to talk with each other about the environmental issue and climate change issue. Yes.
So I also want to have you back up a second. You teach in a K-12 school and also in a higher education university, is that right? So
Exactly.
in the science area. So you want to give people what are your why two jobs, and what does it entail?
Okay, so actually, because I was an elementary school for the homeroom teacher now, but because I got a PhD, so I would like to have some service teaching in my local community schools in University of Tainan. And I taught basically in environmental issues and ecology. Yes.
So Dan, going back over to you then, maybe you need to introduce yourself before you describe your chapter and the follow-up project. So Diana?
Yes, so I was placed in Mexico before the Fulbright experience. I used to be back then an English language teacher at elementary schools for the Ministry of Education. And then I got the opportunity to go to Indiana University for the Fulbright program. And after that, everything was set in motion. I came back to Mexico as an educator in higher education, like foreign language educator in higher education. And then after that, I applied for a program in France, a Spanish teaching assistant program, where I was able to work with the Fulbright project. But to be honest, the Fulbright inquiry project that is included in the book started almost 2 years before Indiana. So I was working at that time, besides the elementary, for a private high school in Mexico, where we created, it was my first encounter with virtual learning environments. And we created this project called Talk to Tech. And at that time, we used to play with Mystery Skype and to bring people from all around the world into our classroom. And we also had a lot of guest speakers. And it was an innovation project that was ongoing. And during this time, I was elected for Fulbright. So that was like the platform that enriched the whole innovation project that was called Talk to Tech in Mexico. And during Fulbright, I got to learn from you, and the outcome of the inquiry project during the Fulbright was a 5-module professional development course on globally networked learning environments. That's how we call it at the time. And back to Mexico, I was able to reproduce the training in several conferences and seminars. And I was contacted by one of my former professors of French when I was in France, and she was interested in collaborating and creating these virtual network learning environment between her students in Mexico and my Spanish learners in France. So that's how we reproduced it again between Mexico and France. And at that time we used Slack, and which is a platform where you can work with students and use different kinds of media. Yes, I think we have a question.
No, you can go ahead and finish that, and he'll jump in after that. Yeah,
Okay,
finish,
great.
describe, because I know you had many challenges there, so I know you want to, I want you to describe those challenges that you faced and how you overcame them or didn't overcome them, actually.
Yes.
So go ahead.
So one of the challenges, I to be honest, I was expecting the French education system where I was placed a little bit more open and aware of the technology that was used at that time. And one of the main challenges is that I found a lot of resistance, which was very similar to the one that I encountered when I was reproducing the training in the conferences and seminars in Mexico. There was a lot of fear from professors of opening the classrooms to the world, of inviting people over. But I guess it was also a fear of losing control, of the fear of changing the role from teacher to facilitator, the fear of teaching through an experiential mode that allowed the students to have more control and choose a preference and their needs and the media that they were going to use to communicate with the other learners in Mexico and France. So that was the main challenge, I would say. But throughout time, I was able to share again all the Fulbright project that I've created in the US with the French teachers that I was collaborating with. And after they saw that there was a huge backup in literature and theory, they give me full access and creativity, freedom of creativity, to be able to implement it. So we work together, Professor Miriam in Mexico, Miriam Bear, and me in Lycée Robespierre, that was the name of the school. And we collaborated for more than 10 weeks. And there were almost 5,000 messages and different types of media exchange. We developed a partnership. So the principal of Lycée Robespierre invited the students, and officially through a letter, we had everything set up. Parents offered their homes to welcome the Mexican students in France. But then we had a main drawback, which was that the different dates of spring break between Mexico and France. So that was something that we didn't foresee. It was a big mistake on my part. I didn't foresee that. I assumed that it was going to be the same spring break, but it wasn't. So then we had so little time left after spring break to process, for the International Office of Tec de Monterrey to process all the documents and the paper required to travel as a group to France. But the partnership was still there, And then after that, my program in France concluded, my migratory status concluded, so I had to return back to Mexico. They kept up the partnership after I came back to Mexico. But then again, France emitted a policy which forbid the use of mobile devices in high schools across the country. So that was one of the big drawbacks of that project, because it was back to the, there was a big transformation for the professors at that time. But then in spite of the efforts, the policy did not allow for the project to continue.
Very good. And the third person who's not with us today, Sandy Tsai, had a project with New York and New Jersey school system set up, and Hurricane Sandy got in the way. So of the exchange, but then they were able to delay the program start, and she was able to take her students from Taiwan to New York and New Jersey to do what they were planning to do. But at first there was a lot of disappointments along the way, a lot of time spent planning and scheduling. So while last week we heard from World Savvy on this show, and we heard a lot about intercultural exchanges and collaborations, from a teacher standpoint, from Jenny's standpoint, from Diana's standpoint, from Sandy's, operationalizing and implementation is not automatic. It's not seamless. There's a lot of frustrations that happen. You have to have flexibility and persistence along the way. And eventually, hopefully, there's a success that happens. And that's the case of Diana and of Jenny and of Sandy. So all three have interesting stories to share. I know Young and Chris have a question for us along the way. So Young, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, so Jenny and Diana, thank you for coming. This is international collaboration or global connection, experiential learning, and all of this are what we aspire to do. We are very interested. And on this show, we had several episodes of teachers engaged in that, So but we've not really had many students. So my question has to do with the students. Diana, you mentioned about earlier resistance, policy may not allow, professors might do this. And I was just wondering, Jenny and Diana, when you introduce students to such a project, and what's their reaction? And so that's really the first question. Second one is that, how did the learning change? If they were connecting with a school locally or in another class in the same school online, would you say something different? So when they're collaborating with someone, let's say in Mexico, in Japan, or in Russia, how is that different? And then finally, has really a lot to do with, do you think the project has changed students' thinking about other people? Has developed different mindset about the globe, has developed different attitudes toward learning. So any kind of comments from both of you would be great. Thank you. Go ahead, Diana, you can go first, and we have Jenny.
Thank you. I had a very positive reaction in this particular project. I believe it was because students were ready for this, as Professor Didi coined, neo-millennial learning styles. They were used to such a traditional way of learning, and in this particular language class, learning from a book, learning from a text, when language is experiential 100%. So I received very, very positive result. I remember I had a lot of trouble with discipline among them. So the minute I engaged them with their mobile devices and through Slack and instant messaging and photos and video, the complete attitude towards the class changed. And at the end, we conducted like a closing feedback survey in which students expressed that, and again, this tacit knowledge was explicitly described by them, like I remember some of them saying that their identity changed as well because they discovered not only the use for the language, because they didn't give language a meaning or a function before, but they also we also tackled barriers and stereotypes among both cultures. So their cultural knowledge, a background of not only a language but a country and a region and a person itself was enriching for them. So in this particular project, students and us as teachers, we had a very positive feedback. But again, I believe it's because the learners were ready for it.
Before we go to Jenny, I think that Diana, you mentioned in particular your goals are empathy and mutual understanding. Is that right?
Yes.
So did you meet those, do you think, in part anyhow? And did you have any measurements of that? How do you get a sense of either of those or other things that your objectives?
I would have loved that. I didn't conduct any quantitative data or run any quantitative data, but it might be interesting. I do have the videos of their feedback. It might be interesting to run like through a coding software, maybe a topic for the next dissertation.
The next dissertation, you're going to do more than one?
Yeah, another one. I just say like through my empirical observations of the videos, of the feedback videos, that it happened. Again, they mentioned very specific topics or things that were completely changing the point of view towards the country as well. More than the language itself was getting to know a country, getting to know people from another culture, which was completely different from their reality, but still so similar in so many ways because of the age of the students.
Jenny. You're muted, Jenny, by the way.
So in my project, my students was excited about the whole project when I mentioned that, because the first time they can talk directly to the foreigners, but they're also afraid of their language expression is not really clearly like me. Our language is not really proficiency, so they also like a bit scary like that. But after this project, we run slowly and smoothly. We talk like those friends. It's not like a teacher connection. It's like a friends come to the classroom and then talk to them about the same issue happened in different countries. So this project also opened students' visions more widely, and especially if they are not like a teacher that all the training, all the knowledge, one direction. It's like friends, a coffee time. They talk and share the same environmental issue from different worlds. So it's quite different experience for the students. Yeah.
How old are your students and how old are yours, Diana? So we get a sense of the people you're working with. What grade levels?
My students is undergraduate students from first grader to, so it's about 17 to 22. And another part for kindergarten is 10 to 12.
So you're dealing with all a wide range. You have two hats, K-12
yes.
hat and a university hat.
Two different characters. One is more straight.
Diana?
16 and 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, you're going to jump in here?
Yeah, so Diana and Jenny, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your experiences. My question is actually about the Fulbrights, and I'm going to include Kurt in the question. So he can't just be a host, he's now also going to be a guest for us. The Fulbright program has been around for a very long time, and it's always been a program that was involved with face-to-face. So Fulbright fellows would travel, they'd spend a lot of time in a different context, face-to-face with a different culture, sharing their insights and learning from that. And the pandemic disrupted all that. So Kurt, my question for you is, during the time that the Fulbright program was effectively shut down by the pandemic, have you been able to do anything to compensate for that? And how do you see the Fulbright program proceeding in the future? And for Jenny and for Diana, my question is, a lot of what you planned involved face-to-face in the same way that your own experience involved face-to-face. But now that's become much harder, and ironically, online has become much easier because of the pandemic. So as you look forward in the future, do you see yourselves doing exchanges that may be more virtual and less reliant on face-to-face? And do you think that those can still work?
So I'll let Diana go first and Jenny, and I'll go last.
It's very interesting how my view on virtual learning environments completely changed after pandemic. Well, it was still a pandemic, but after the first outbreak. Before that, I did the Fulbright inquiry project based on virtual learning environments. And then I came back to Mexico promoting virtual learning environments. And then I did a master's in applied linguistics, which my dissertation topic was virtual learning environments and training professors on that. Because I could see all of the advantages of changing our learning environment in Mexico in this particular language center where I used to work. But now I am a student again of the University of Glasgow. And I would say that being a student in pandemic, with these expertise in virtual learning environments, it made me think about how they have broadened the gap of inclusivity among learners, and inclusivity regarding all different intersectional aspects like social, pedagogical, technological. So I would say that in the future, I would prefer, face-to-face is very important, but you can also develop a strong sense of community in a virtual learning environment. But I would prefer to keep a good balance of both, and to put the systems and the technology infrastructure in place, of the institutions in place, to be able to hold both at the same time and give the freedom of choice to the learner to decide which one they want to take. And that can change and vary day to day. So I will opt for a good infrastructure that can hold both modes at the same time.
Jenny?
Okay. Actually, I think pandemic is like a software in your phone that you have to update or renew at some point so that you can run more smoothly. And actually, in the beginning of the pandemic, or let's say the isolation time, we are really shocked that we have to use online classroom. But you can see students and teachers, they just like a jump into the next generation quickly than we thought. So break the limits we thought in the beginning. We think we can only work in the classroom, in one classroom, or maybe we need face to face. But because of pandemic, everybody's skills was updated like 3 levels than they was before. So everyone technique skills was like rising up very quickly. So now it makes everything possible. So in my class, we have a training workshop, international, like we have to have a summer camp and face to face, but because the pandemic, everything runs online, but it still works. So the only thing we need to break is the time zone, because if we want to make it in the same time, we need to check the time if it's suitable for Asia with the Europe or the North America. So I think everything makes possible.
It reminds me of the Wikibook project I ran with Beijing Normal and with people in Taiwan actually and Malaysia. We had to check time zones, course schedules, because China starts later, Britain starts later, everyone starts later than the US typically. So, my students wanted to get started actually. We had Indiana State students on a project once and they put us all to shame. They got done halfway through the semester, they're already done, and people in China hadn't even started yet. So it gets kind of complex when you're doing these cross-cultural projects and exchanges. They're fun to do. Students look forward to them, but it requires a lot of planning skills on the front end, organization skills. And I wrote about that in a couple of different articles that I could send to each of you. But to answer Chris's question, here at Indiana University, the nature of the Fulbright is 3-pronged. At the time that they were in our program, they were part of a School of Education project from our CEDAR program, the Center for Innovative Educational Resources. And that CEDAR department and program doesn't exist anymore, actually. It got disbanded after they left. That grant that they came in on, the Fulbright grant, also went to Arizona or Arizona State after it was at Indiana for 4 years, because the State Department farmed it out to an organization that liked to work with Arizona or Arizona State. I think it was University of Arizona. And so IU lost out just because the way the money was handled was changed. We did as Diana and Jhenyi would attest, I think we did a pretty good job in the program in placing people in schools. And I might have you explain what you did, because they all had to do inquiry projects. They all had to visit a number of schools and do some benchmarking in effect and collaborations. They all had to audit 2 classes. It was a pretty intense program while they're creating a community, while they're having fun with the other 10, 12, 15 people that are now their lifelong friends in that. So we have that Fulbright program but that doesn't exist anymore. The second Fulbright program that we have tends to come out of the School of Global and International Studies, which used to be our East Asian Language Center, our African Studies Center, Southeast Asia languages, all the Uralic languages. All those centers got brought together into a new building, and former Senator Lugar and some others. In fact, we had the Secretary of State come here when they christened it, and I think you might have attended that service. But yeah, we're massive in the area of language learning, and so they have contracts with a number of countries for bringing people over, and they have a flowing of a lot of the money from the stands, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan, and that region of the world. We get a lot of Fulbright people, teachers, and so they were also part of our class and coming in. That's still happening to some degree, but there's a trickling effect, but that's still happening. We do still have folks coming over. And a lot of that is to have people come for a year as a Fulbrighter or half year, and then they might get interested in graduate school and a doctoral program, then they come back. And a number of students were in this particular class, came back for their full doctoral studies. The third way, and the most frequent now, is the people individually applying, as they would at Harvard, as they would at Kansas, as they would at Arizona State. They individually apply for a Fulbright scholarship, and then they contact a professor to come. The atmosphere, the aura, the sense of community that we had 5 years ago, 8 years ago within the School of Education is dramatically changed due to COVID. It's dramatically changed because we don't have that project. And also one other thing, we had one professor who you all might know from Language Ed, who brought over 30 teachers from China every year they wanted to come, and they would all want to sit in my classes and other classes. And so I would often have more people internationally sitting in my class than enrolled in the class. And that was a lot of fun. That doesn't exist anymore. All those people don't exist. So there's a big vacuum today. In part, it's caused by COVID. In part, it's caused by policy changing within the School of Ed and personnel changes. So there's no simple answer for your question of the prediction of what will happen in the future, but my prediction is it's got to be better than what's going on right now. Because it was a zenith type of experience that was going on. It was a peak learning and teaching experience when Jenny, Sandy, and Diana were here and others were here. It was an amazing experience. It was like a mini United Nations in our classes, with foods of the world, culture of the world, customs of the world, dress and so forth. It was so much fun. And now we're basically teaching online and blended and not seeing anybody. And it's I teach people how to teach online, but to be honest, it's a disappointment. It's a real disappointment going into the School of Ed and going onto our campus now. It's changing a bit. The life is starting to come back. In fact, we mentioned that yesterday as my students and I walked across campus and thought about graduations in a week. It's starting to pick up. It's starting to change, but the aura, the atmosphere that we had, if I could package that time that they were in our program, and basically this book becomes that packaging moment. It becomes the document that says, hey, there was really some cool things happening, and you can do this too. Other universities, other places can get involved in something like this. It doesn't have to be at a university level. It could be at a high school level, right? These kinds of stories of teacher change around the world can happen. And Diane could do her own book and so forth. So that's my message, I think, is that we proved that significant change can happen from a community of teachers, a community of practice, where there's extensive sharing, extensive respect and genuineness and collaboration, and just a tremendous amount of processing of ideas and sharing and trying them out. And once they try them out, then they in turn go back to their home countries and try them out there, which they did. We have 41 stories, and we have 22 countries in the book. So that's my answer for that, Chris. Does that make sense, Chris? Yeah. So I have two questions for Diana, but I think I'm going to wait and hold them off. I want Punya to jump in here with his question first.
Sure, thank you. And I think and I'm going to continue Chris's trend of having Kurt, you being a guest today, while and host, right? So one of the things that was talked about that came up in a couple of times was that there were these challenges, whether it's challenges of time zone, challenges of scheduling, and so on. So having done this kind of work now, and again, because of COVID, things have changed, I guess, right? So if somebody wants to do an international project where they want to bring these build these collaborative networks to do sort of experiential learning, like you said, what would be some pieces of advice that you would offer anybody who's interested in engaging in this kind of work? I mean, so here we had the Fulbright, which was funding your travel and so on. When you don't have those, like what would be some quick takeaways that people should keep in mind if other educators are there, whether in higher ed or K-12, who might want to do projects like this? And whoever wants to go first, and we'll just do a round robin, all three. So Kurt, I guess end with you again, but Jenny, Dan, either of you can start us off. What would be some pieces of advice you would give anybody who wants to do something like this? Anybody jump in.
That space, Diana, jump in there.
That's actually one of the questions I always got from the teachers I used to work with in Mexico. And I included in the professional development course, it's module 4, it's called Global Collaboration and Partnerships. So there's multiple organizations around the world that promote these intercultural and international collaborative projects. The one I can think of right now is I Earned. So you just really need access to internet and mobile device to be able to connect with them. So not necessarily have to travel. Like, I mean, Jenny and I were very grateful and very fortunate of having this experience, but we do understand that it's a very particular and special experience. So just having knowledge and being aware of which are the organizations around the world that promote this type of collaborative projects. And most of them are for free. So you have a list of professors and a list of courses and specific topics in which you can engage with. It's very, very easy, I would say, to connect with them.
Jenny, you have to unmute.
Fulbright program is actually amazing program for, I think it's the first time we can talk like peers, because they are all teachers, distinguished teachers from all over the world. Some countries I've never been to, or I've never thought about the environment of their country, such as Botswana, Israel. So it's a really amazing project for us. But we all know pandemic makes things complicated. So I think some nonprofit organization or some different platform can maybe overcome this difficult of, but actually they need a big budget, to be honest. So actually it's a really difficult for me if if the Fulbright program stops, and I think it's really pity for us. Yes.
So Kurt, before you jump in, quick comment here. And I think we often in the United States don't realize the power of some of these programs that we've had in terms of sort of the soft power that the US can influence in the world. And I think the Fulbright is a great example of that. I know a lot of people who, when they were very young, went because of Peace Corps, went, to international, had international opportunities, and that transformed their lives, and they've devoted their lives to this sort of the global international sort of work. And I think that the Fulbright is a great example of that. And I sometimes worry that in this more inward-looking phase that we see all the countries in the world seem to be in, and Zhao, you have talked about that in the previous episodes, that we lose something of that. Because, I mean, I know just recently, I got a question from some professor in Monash, and that made me dig through some old books and writings of mine. And I realized how influential the USIS and the British Council had been to my growth and development when I was a very young person, as in high school in India. Those were the libraries that I could go to. Those were the places I could go to and watch, some interesting documentaries and so on. And so I think that aspect of sort of our State Department of the United States and the effort that goes in there is often not valued by people within the US as being hugely influential in terms of transforming the way people think across the world. And I just a quick comment on that, because I know it has meant a lot to me personally. And I think these, as we can see from the testimonies from the two of you, has meant a lot to you as well.
So I'll add to what they had to say, unless one of you wanted to comment on what Punya said there. Okay, so I agree with both of them, and Dan is right. I Earn is one of the prominent organizations out there, and I know that former director of it. I thought about bringing him in for a show. Ed Brigert would be great, and maybe a couple of these folks. But we brought World Savvy last week. We're bringing people from the Center for Global Change in Calgary in a couple of weeks. So we are hearing from some of these programs. I also worked with the vice president of EPALS, and we had, as I said, World Savvy on here, Taking It Global. I worked with folks from Taking It Global. So being aware of what exists out there, first of all, being aware of what's possible. So first, if you're going to change, if you're going to do anything, just explore, read a lot, read what's happening out there, and become aware of them, and go to conferences after you've tried something out, or even before you have. Pilot in a small way, dip your toes in a small way, and then present on it. You'll be surprised how many people come up to you afterwards and share their business cards with you, or share their identification and exchange with you their emails, that you might expand your program beyond the one school exchange between Mexico and France. Now it's 10 schools in Mexico and 13 schools in France or in Spain or in other places. But start small. The way to get, dip your toes in and become aware of what's possible out there, and build on that. So first you become aware there's always a resistance. I can't do this. I couldn't possibly, but overcome that. As you can see, Diana and Jhenyi both overcame that initial fear or trepidation in trying this out. And in fact, I think, Diana, as part of your inquiry project at IU, that was in your guidance, same with Jhenyi. Do each of you want to describe what was in your inquiry, your project that you had briefly, because I want to ask other questions, but Jhenyi or Diana, was this part of your inquiry program project?
Yes. So at the end, I came up with the 5-module professional development course. So the first one was like an introduction to intercultural competence. The second module was the strategy coined by Stark Measuring globally networked learning environments. Module 3 was about the technology for virtual learning. Module 4 was exactly these partnerships that already existed that could facilitate the design of a virtual learning environment. And the last one was called Share and Feedback, so that people who took the training will be able to share and promote their activities. Yes, so this was the outcome of the inquiry project.
Jhenyi, how about yours? Muted. You're muted, by the way.
My inquiry project is about to create a performance-based development in learner centers education for ENL elementary students. And actually, 2020 is the year we started in Taiwan. We have a new curriculum, new national curriculum. So, and it's also focusing on performance-based classroom. And also we are now promoting so-called bilingual classroom. We use the content language integrated with the language learning. So I think it's we are still working in, but we make a team, like a consulting team, to lead, to facilitate some other teachers to become, to get trained, become a teacher who can create the performance-based learning environment.
So as Diana said, she got started with her inquiry project. That springboarded. As you said, you got started with the national curriculum changes. That springboarded. Many teachers, millions of teachers around the world got started doing these kinds of things because of COVID. We need something to light the match. And in most of these Fulbrighter cases, it was the inquiry, the mandatory inquiry project when you came to Indiana, or if you went to Arizona or whatever, that got them rolling, that got them started. I'm going to come back with a couple questions after Chris has a comment or question. Chris.
So when I was growing up a very long time ago, of course, my education socialized me. And that's explicitly one of the purposes of education, to socialize you to the culture and the norms of whatever country you're living in. And it was a pretty uncomplicated socialization, as I recall. It said, well, the United States is clearly the greatest country in the world, and we hope that other countries can learn something from us. And they are kind of an interesting theme park for us to go and visit every now and then. It was a very naive model of international collaboration. And today, I think as we work with students, it's a very complicated model that we're trying to convey. On one level, we are saying still, yes, you're growing up in a particular country, and that country has some claim on your loyalty and some claim on your behaving according to its culture. But we're also saying, and rightly, there's a lot we can learn from other countries who have different priorities and different cultures and different languages and different perspectives. And so we want to expose you to those, and things like the innovations that you've been describing are really important. But I think there's a third level too that's emerging that says there's a kind of loyalty to the world that may transcend some of the loyalty to countries. That things like climate change, because they affect the entire world, supersede some of the loyalty to countries and even alliances among countries. And it's complicated. It's complicated to try to convey that to kids. And I'm wondering how you go about this, what kind of messages you send, because some of the statements that I just made would certainly be controversial within many classrooms in the United States.
I'm currently taking a class at the University of Malta called Education for Sustainability, and when I was in the US, I heard a lot of this discourse about promoting our learners to become global citizens. So as part of the partnerships in Module 4, I included the website of the Sustainable Development Goals, which leads literally like step 1, step 2, step 3, teachers into integrating the Sustainable Development Goals within their praxis, no matter what the course the teaching is. So I would say that this is the way that I have seen on in an empirical basis of how to promote this sense of global citizenship that leads also to global dialogue, because you have a starting point, a common starting point.
Jenny?
So my part for those controversial issues, such as climate change or something like let's say Paris Agreement or energy issues, I think because I will back to the student centers, because the online technique skills become so important during the pandemic. So I will have some courses about the media literacy. So we will give them, we will have some platform, some website that have scientific numbers, so they can know what's going on by real stats. For example, talking about climate change, if you don't really look into the numbers, you just feel it. Maybe people will think every year is the same, but when you see clearly in the website, they have some scientific numbers. For example, in Taiwan, we have the national weather report, so we can check from 1980 to 2020. We can see the numbers ups and downs, and then to know that the temperature actually is rising up. So after they have a correct research, not basically from the news or from the social media, but basically from the scientific evidence, then they will have a much clearly notice that for those controversial issues, I would love to bring the media illiteracy concept to my class.
This has been fascinating. We have a couple minutes left, and I do want to get back to the comment that Diane made earlier about her dissertation. You indicated that you were training professors within this climate, and I've seen graduate students try to train professors before, and it's a no-win situation. They often lose out. And so it sounds like you're able to actually complete your dissertation. So what were you trying to do? And I assume you had some success, unlike some of my students. What was it?
I conducted an action research project inspired in the inquiry project. So we basically, with my faculty advisors and experts on the field, we redesigned or updated the inquiry project. We brought more theoretical background. We follow a lot your research on the evolution of education, technology, and society, as well as Professor Chris' neo-millennial learning styles, which I'm a huge fan, and it's such an honor for me to be here talking to both of you, because you're like a huge element of my theoretical framework. And so based on theory, we redesigned it, and to be able to graduate, I had to implement the first part, which was like the first module with the teachers. And again, it's very challenging. It's not an easy thing. It's not a win-win sometimes, as you mentioned. But we had positive feedback, at least of the first module, which was the introduction of the course and a little bit of intercultural competence. But yes, that's to be seen in the future. I would love to be able to keep conducting it. I've trained, when I came after Indiana, I was able to share in conferences and seminars the 5 modules. But again, it was based on the inquiry project. It was not as solid as it is today.
So you finished a PhD and you went back for more education into Glasgow. What are you doing? Why are you doing this to yourself?
I don't know, but I finished. So I have 2 bachelors, and in Mexico I finished my first master's in applied linguistics. And here in Glasgow, I was inspired. They have so it's called International Masters in Adult Education for Social Change. So I believe I had this need to learn about how to bring or how to land or focus adult education into social change environments. And right now I'm working in NGOs for refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers in English language learning.
So are you going to stay in Europe and not go back to Mexico and just work with refugees? Is that the goal?
I would love to. I would love to. It's a very challenging environment. But yes, I would love to give back a little bit. I feel so fortunate for having access to all of these programs. So if I can give a little bit back into social change, I would love to stay in one of these organizations, yes.
So I need to introduce the next show. It's only going to take me 10 seconds. Jhenyi, what's next in 15 seconds for you?
For me,
Yeah.
I would definitely love to share with everyone and to have some globally international. And I really hope there are new globally connection like Fulbright or like IU exchange teachers projects coming on soon.
More global collaboration, more interaction with others. We'll try and do it. I'm going to try and create a center for such in the future. So I will involve you. I want to thank Diana and Jhenyi for coming in. I want to thank Sandy for her participation to get the show started, to get it going. And if you have a chance, write to me for all 3 of their chapters or write to them. Their emails are in the blog post for this week. I'm sure they'd be happy to share with you what they've done and their chapters in the book and what they plan to do in the future. Next week in show 105, we'll talk to Quality Matters. Quality is an important issue. We'll have 3 executives or 3 people heavily involved in Quality Matters. So thank you again for coming to show 104.